Let me open the Harbor Development Committee meeting slated for this hour at this date. Thank you, a number of members of the public, for being here, and thank you to HCAM, who agreed to televise this meeting on a closed circuit basis. It's not being publicly televised tonight. It will be available on a delayed basis, probably Friday or sometime thereafter. But because we collectively thought, between Bathing Beach trustees and ourselves in the Harbor Development, that we should early on show people and give people a sense of what the initial thinking is, we prevailed on HCAM to join us and be able to point back to people who ask, well, hey, you could take a look at the closed circuit version of this to get a sense of what's happening. So I'm Bill Reardon, Chairman of the Harbor Development Committee. 4 other members are present this evening. 2 of our members are not present. We are now opening the Harbor Development Committee portion of the meeting. It's now a joint meeting with the Bathing Beach trustees because we work together on a lot of these set issues and matters that relate to the harbor as a whole. Our principal item of agenda for the evening is the Bathhouse Snack Shack proposal, and I'm willing to entertain. Alan and I have spoken this afternoon about how we would run this meeting. I will just open our meeting, approve the minutes. We'll go into the first subject on the agenda, which is new business, and that is this proposal, and we have several presenters from architectural firms here to discuss that. So I had sent out copies of the minutes to members of the Harbor Development Committee yesterday. Did people have a chance to take a look at those?
Yes.
And if Ed, I had modified somewhat, added a few things as you saw. Would someone be willing to make a motion to approve those minutes? This is the meeting of July 17th. Thank you, Eric. Second. All in favor? Aye. All right, so with that, we're into the portion of our session that's called New Business, and the first item is review of preliminary designs and concepts for the bathhouse. And I'm going to turn it back for this portion of the meeting to Alan Peralt, who's chairman of the Bathing Beach Trustees.
Thanks, Bill. I'm here with Ed Johnson and Chris Daly of the Bathing Beach Trustees. And is a matter of a little bit of introduction before the main gist of this meeting, I believe, should be the professionals we've hired, the architects and the engineers, making their presentation, why we are where we are today. And the idea is to gather as much input as possible so we can continue to vet this in as open a process as possible. But first, I wanted to give some background as to how we got to where we are today. The concept of a bathhouse snack shop first came up in the Harbor Master Plan back in 2007. Mr. Daly was a member of the Harbor Development Committee that oversaw the master plan. The boardwalk we've talked about was part of that as well, and the Whitney Wharf pedestrian bridge. So there's a number of things that we've actually seen the light of day in the last year that were originally envisioned in that 2007 master plan. In 2010, the town meeting approved a overlay district that was proposed by the Harbor Planning Task Force, which was made up of members of the Selectmen, the Conservation Commission, the Harbor Development Committee, the Bathing Beach Trustees. I was a representative of Harbor Development at the time. And one of the thoughts was to allow for accessory uses, including like food uses. The rationale being that that would generate some more public activity along the waterfront. Along the harbor. I mean, the harbor is regularly used by boaters and swimmers, and we wanted to try to be as broad as possible to attract as many people. Quite honestly, that's what allowed Red Eye Roasters to exist at the marina. That was predicated on that zoning being done. Now, that zoning also allows the trustees to put out a request for proposals to allow for an accessory use of a concession use with our bathhouse. That we, in order to do that, we actually first, and then in 2011, after that was done, we actually engaged a architectural intern with the Boston Architectural Center who came up with the first concept. And the concept was to use the existing bathhouse, or bunker, as Jim would call it from CPC, and try to augment that and try to put a snack shop in it. So he came up with a sketch, gratis, you know, but it was an 880 square foot building. So in 2013, we got legislative approval, after town meeting approved it, that we could actually put an RFP out to sign a lease for a potential vendor. And 2013 to 2014, we actually, you know, put out an RFP for that, the first one being in 2014, and to see if we could get a vendor to work within that existing footprint. Long story short, after going through a lengthy RFP process, we didn't get any responses. The answer from the ones we talked to, that the footprint was just too small. If you're trying to still have restrooms and left over with maybe 400 or 500 square feet for concessionaire, it just wasn't enough space. Having heard that, we then started to look at the concept of a new building. And our first thought was to do as Mr. Lasordo has used the Tom Sawyer approach, where we actually put the RFP out and asked somebody to build a building on their dime, you know, to see if they would actually go through, we'd give them the land, and they would actually build a building with restroom facilities and a concession space. We did get one response from that, from Sullivan's of Castle Island, and we initially accepted their proposal. As they went through the process of looking at the expense, there were a couple of hang-ups, one of the most notable being the expense it was going to be to build a building on leased land. That's not the easiest thing to finance. And the others was the distance to utilities, whether it was gas or sewer and other capacity issues. And ironically, they actually hired CHA, who the town has since hired, to look at some of that. And Gabe Crocker can address some of that when he makes his presentation. So then we went back to the drawing board. So the idea was now to come up with funds where maybe the town could build a building themselves. Working with the town engineer, Mr. Fernandez, the trustees submitted an application to the Seaport Council last year that was approved this year for the sum of $700,000 in February of this year. So we were one of the larger grants issued by the Seaport Council, which gives funds to a number of seacoast municipalities. And it was on the concept of new bathhouses, a concession space, and a meeting room that would cite some of the maritime history of Hingham. You know, so basically the building is expanded from the footprint of an existing 850 square feet to something closer to 2,400. I'll let the architect speak to that, 2,200 to 2,400 square feet with these three uses. So after that, we also went to town meeting this year to $150,000 of matching funds to give us funds for engineering and architectural and feasibility. The whole initial process being to vet this. Where would it be located? What are the pros, the cons of different locations? How do we make everything work aesthetically? It's an historic district. There's Chapter 91 issues. There's a number of permitting issues, you know, planning board issues as far as parking, some site plan review issues. So the thought was we have a number of things to do. Carol Piles was influential in working with us on that. And we succeeded in getting the $150,000 from town meeting. And that money was primarily to be used initially for the concept. And with that, we went through a process of selecting an architect and an engineering firm. And the engineering firm we selected is CHA, represented by Gabe Crocker this evening. And the architectural firm is Strukalowski, represented by Sevi Strukalowski and Mark Coughlin. I think without boring everyone to death, that's kind of the background. We then have charged them with Mr. Fernandez and our other group to go and start to look at the pros and the cons of where should the building be located, why in one location, why not in a certain location. We're not married to it being near the existing bathhouse anymore. The idea being if it was in a central location, you know, closer to the gazebo, there would be some benefits. It's like, again. So that's kind of where we are now, and I think with that I'll introduce the professional team, and I'll kind of let you guys play by ear. And some of this is driven by the engineering, Mark and Sevi, I think, as far as siting. Not that the architecture wasn't as well, but I'll let you decide. I'll let the three of you come up and decide going back and forth how we're going to do this. What I would like to point out to the people in the audience, though, is I would like them to make their presentation how they got to where they are first. You know, before we entertain questions, let them kind of make the presentation. There'll be plenty of time. This is the major agenda item.
I just wanted to ask, you know, as a precursor to these people presenting, I understand the rationale for doing this, as per my understanding of what you said, was that this is to open up the waterfront so more people can enjoy the waterfront. We were here 20 years, Charles King, 76 Lincoln Street. We've been here 20 years, and when we first got here, I believe it was a private beach. Now it's open to the public, which is fine. Why would you want more draw, more people, and South Boston, you go to a fast food restaurant here, the trash is all across the street. Why would we ever want this? Tell me that before these gentlemen.
No, we're going to do we're going to do what I said. We're going to allow them to make a presentation. We'll have time for talking about who should and who shouldn't, but I would like to follow the protocol that I laid out. I'd like them to be able to make a presentation for the entire audience to hear their presentation, and then we'll be here for a while. So with that,
Yeah, I think I'll start it off to identify some of the areas where we've been looking at for potential siting. My name is Gabe Crocker. I'm with CHA Consulting. We've been engaged to assist with the siting of the building, and then ultimately, if it proceeds to the next phase, is the design and permitting from a site perspective. So one of the critical elements I think is already being touched on is that's important before we can move forward with any type of design or permitting process is to select the location of where the building would be located. And so we've taken a look at several locations from various avenues, looking at it from resource area perspective. Obviously, we've got the beach and the coastal bank, which is a designated resource area, and there's a 100-foot buffer associated with that. That anything that we do within that actually carries a higher threshold from a permitting perspective to justify the work within that area. We looked at it from floodplain elevations, and obviously we've got the updated floodplain elevations in that area. So we've looked at it from that perspective, and then also we've assessed where the utilities are located, and single-phase electric is available at the site, but essentially none of the other primary ones we would need, water, sewer, and gas, are in close proximity. The closest location with capacity is actually down in Ship Street. So as we looked at siting, we took into consideration kind of all of those moving parts and just identified the pros and cons of each. So one of the first locations we looked at was the potential to site it within the open space between the two parking lots. The pros from a civil engineering perspective is that land is higher and potentially outside of the FEMA floodplain. It's actually the closest of the locations we looked at to the utilities, so the cost for extending utilities to get to where they're available, that's also the shortest route. The cons are that it would conflict with the location of the gazebo, and it would also have a potentially fairly significant impact in the overall, open space, the grass area that exists. And when we put a building in that area, and it's not directly tied to a parking lot, we've got to make sure that we've got access to it, walkways, seating areas, ADA access, potential drop-off, pickup for trash, deliveries, things of that nature. So what this plan really, while it shows the building, the actual impact in that area could be quite a bit more substantial once we take all of those things into consideration. We then said, okay, well, it feels like it may make sense to connect it to the parking lot so that we can take advantage of that access. So the first place we looked at was right off the end of the existing parking lot. Seemed like a natural extension off of the end. As we come into that location, though, we also were, obviously, the building is getting closer to the beach, more exposed to the elements. It's in the floodplain, and it's also within, probably more importantly, it's within the buffer zone for the coastal bank. We then took a look across at the site of the Grove. That's actually one of the locations that Sullivan's Castle Island was focused on as part of theirs. It's higher in elevation. It is the furthest away from potential utilities, so the cost to get services there goes up substantially. It would have, trying to site that within the Grove would have an impact on the Grove. And there'd be a high potential for tree loss in that area. And it also feels like, potentially from a con, it's also getting further away from potentially engaging folks in that parking lot and coming from the marina as well. And the last place we looked at was siting it off the backside of the parking lot in this area. It seemed like, as we looked at the various locations, we kept being drawn to somewhere in there because it's outside of the coastal bank resource area. It could still be nicely tied to the parking lot. It's kind of a medium location to try and keep the utilities as short as possible, but still be able to engage, folks across this entire area. So, obviously we're still open to the selection and the location of it, but those were the 4 primary areas that we looked at. As part of this one in particular, one of the things we thought of with this one is you had mentioned being able to increase the parking count. So we did a sketch that showed what that could potentially look like. If we extended the parking off of the end of this row to a turnaround that tied back in, it has the potential to provide a nice focal point for the building. A meeting spot and a focal point that draws people down this way with the building at the end. That's essentially what we've looked at to date. You want to talk about the building? Sure. Do you want to take questions before I move on?
Go.
Well,
I have a question.
Keep going, I think we should.
I think what I'd still like to do is have the architects make, we'll have plenty of time for questions, but I think you get the whole picture. I'd rather have the questions after we get the whole picture.
It's responsible for the structure itself, not the food service aspect of it. Is that correct?
Correct. The idea that would be a concession. Yep.
Good evening. I'm Sevi Strikalowski, Strikalowski Architecture.
Mark Hoffman, Strikalowski Architecture.
To the extent that you can be close to the mics, it will be picked up on HCAM.
Especially if I have a cough drop.
I'm Mark Hoffman, Strikalowski Architecture, and this is Sevi Strikalowski.
I think this aerial perspective, which we did quickly for Karen Polito's visit a couple of weeks ago, gives a sense of how important this great asset of the whole beach and park and marina and grove is to the downtown, and how it's all integrated. And there's a great opportunity with the walkway and with the building situated properly to make this a highly used asset. Our initial sense, and we'll go into the building plan a little bit, is that in the improvements to the site and this extraordinary grove of trees and the overlook you have of the harbor, that there's really, it's a park that will come into its own, and we see the building as being a kind of park pavilion, not being like a house that somehow got around the zoning, not like a clam shack so much, but a building that's integrated with the landscape. And all we're doing here is looking at various roof forms, how they might feel, thinking about materials. But we see the building as integrated and as being a year-round building, which it will be, even though the concession stand is from spring to fall. The community room and the toilet facilities from the inside will be utilized year-round, so it's going to become a very important part of the community. The The site, siting that Gabe discussed is interesting in how the building connects the various parts of the site, and also how the building forms a streetscape, and we've made an effort not to impact views that exist now for neighbors. Interestingly, this is the Governor Long Park, and wetlands. There are no houses here, and so this location kind of lent itself to something that would have minimal impact. The building itself, we feel it needs to be a simplicity and a timelessness. It needs to be easily maintained, and it needs to relate to the site. The building that we're suggesting is an L-shaped building where there'll be a covered porch to a vendor, to the concession, which, depending on the vendor, will have various requirements for walk-in coolers and freezers, maybe not. I mean, a lot of that remains to be seen as the bids come in and the interest is generated amongst the vendors. The toilet facilities, which will be large enough to dress in and to serve both directly from the outside for seasonal use, and also from the inside for year-round use, will be accessible. We have the right number of fixtures to serve the several hundred people that are expected to enjoy the beach and all that goes on now on the waterfront. The community room will be, as Alan said, an opportunity to have various groups meet there. It'll be informative. There'll be interpretive signage and the kinds of park signage and information that will connect the community to this incredible harbor resource. And we've located the community room in a way that will open out on 180 degrees to all sides of the harbor. So however the building sits, this will be both work with the concession stand and independently of it. It will serve as a waiting area while certain long-term orders are being picked up. That interpretive signage will be informative to people using that. And yet, it'll also be a quiet area. We see separation of the uses between the people getting food and those who might come down during the day and just read. And there'll be sort of a separate community space, outside space. We envision a terrace, maybe pergola, again, overlooking the open space in the harbor. Again, there are a lot of ways of envisioning how a building might fit, but at this time, we're suggesting that there may be a park-like pavilion that's integrated with the landscape is the right approach, that it not become too isolated and sort of a standalone element, but integrated with the landscape. Thank you.
I think one of the things you should notice, the way this is designed, is the restrooms that Sevi was pointing out can be locked off from the outside off-season. So if you're getting into the fall, into the winter, we're using it as a community room. The community room will have access into a corridor, which the men's and women's room is off of. So it's kind of a duality as far as how it can be used. It can be accessible during the summertime from directly outside, in which case the community room could be closed for all intents and purposes at a certain time of day while the concession area is open, and then vice versa. If in the fall or winter time we wanted to have a meeting like this, we could actually hold it at a meeting like that and have our own restrooms that would be just available for that building, which I think is a creative use of the space. Mark, any other things to add on
Do
that?
you want to address the flood issues, and this is something that we're working with the
Yeah.
engineers
Sure.
on?
The various, you may have noticed the various ramps and the raised porches. There's two approaches to the FEMA flood zone construction. One is to have the first floor elevation and framing above the base flood elevation, which is probably 3 feet above the current location of grade. The other option, which is not shown, is we can drop down the construction and then create a bathtub, which is what they call dry-proof construction. You can extend the foundations, drop the slab, and the problem with that is you have to resist, the slabs and foundations have to resist buoyancy, which can get pretty cost prohibitive. But somewhere there's a balance between the cost of all this external platforms and deck and having dam proofing.
The other thing I'd ask you to identify is we're in a relatively tight budget, even though $850,000 combined with engineering, architecture, and construction seems like it's a decent amount of money. If you're building a commercial type of building of this size with prevailing wage considerations, it'll definitely be another consideration. I wonder if you could address how you've looked at the design to maximize that flexibility from a cost point of view?
Sure. In the prevailing wages, when you get into the bidding, there's things to look at are the various file sub-bids, which are each trade, once they exceed threshold 20,000, you have to send those separate packages. But one of the things we're looking at, and this building seems to lend itself thus far, is going with a module construction that can be delivered to the site, and it could be 80% complete on the interior, and then we can dress the exterior on-site with a GC, and that's still up there. We've already looked at it. We've talked to, ran it by some of the module people that we know of that are familiar with the construction, and this could be built in 3 different.
It lends itself to modular construction. We always try to think in those terms. The general contractor may elect not to go that route. The floodplain issue is one where we're working with CHA to look at the grade change. I mean, we're at what, elevation 8? The floodplain is at 10, I think, so this is low. So we're looking at a combination of bringing the grade up without, disturbing the site, and then so that we have a balance of structure and grade change, so it's a harmonious siting.
Okay.
The building, by the way, is 2,700 feet.
2,700 feet now, okay, to make all this work.
Yeah.
Or maybe closer to 28.
Yeah, well, I think when you start getting into all these things and trying to get a 500 square foot meeting room and restrooms that meet code and enough space to attract a concessionaire that would want, and the concept behind this is that the concessionaire will generally generate enough revenue that this building, for us to sustain keeping it open and oversee, have greater than what the costs are of maintaining it. Would have separate heating systems. The idea is to give them a shell, the concessionaire, that would be suitable to their needs. And quite honestly, that kind of little that's almost a vent area that would really be venting, being used by the concessionaire in a more attractive way than some of the ones that you see occasionally on metal vents that kind of go through roofs. The idea is to make it, and we're going to have historical commission approval on this. So when Sevi mentions modular construction, I don't want people to think this is going to be like 3 trailers buttoned together. It's going to have to pass historical muster, and if I've actually overseen the construction of modular homes, aesthetically this you won't be able to tell the difference. It's more of a case of sizing it in a way that lends itself to the components fitting together. So I think that's an important consideration. What I'd like to do first is, I know there'll be some general questions about the concept, but I'd like first to have questions to either Gabe or Mark or Sevi on what they've presented, on questions of the siting or of the design, and if we could start with that and just identify, sorry? And I'd like to do it with the committee first, and then, which is the way we usually do these things, in the committee first and then the general public. So anybody from the Bathing Beach Trustees, and a question first for these gentlemen before we go?
Just about, first question was about the grade.
Chris, excuse me, anyone speaking, if you're not at a microphone, please come and speak to the mic, because the whole point of having this televised was to be able to have this available for others who cannot be here tonight at a subsequent time.
I wonder if you could explain again, I'm not an engineer and I don't have construction experience, the process of raising it to meet that, I think you said 10-foot level?
Sure, it's actually base flood elevation, which is set by FEMA, the floodplain,
Yeah.
plus 2 feet. And then it's a matter of interpretation of the code effects of the bottom of the framing of the first floor. So that's one. We got base flood elevation, which is 10.
10.
The parking lot's 8, so now we're already 2 feet above, and we're looking at going maybe another foot to
Okay.
meet that FEMA requirement.
Yeah.
The other option, if we can't get the grade, or if it's too cost prohibitive to get the grade up to that level, we can drop it down, and then as we drop it down, we have to we create a bathtub, basically, to resist the flood.
Okay.
And that means all opening, the doors would have flood dam construction. So
Yeah.
the deeper you go down, the thicker the slab.
Got it.
We go through this, it's an iterative process where, we don't want to raise the grades too much that it just looks artificially filled and raised where we're putting this. So you want to bring it up enough subtly that it feels right with the natural landscape in terms of the elevation.
Yeah, that was my issue.
And then you're dealing with the elevation you're trying to set the building at. And it's how do you make up the difference? Do you make it up with ramps and stairs? Do you try and bring the building down a little bit, like he's saying, based on the type of construction? And then we play this massaging game in the middle to try and find the right balance between the two.
How about the cost of option A versus option B?
Well, with options, call this option A, the raise, now it's cheaper, and we still have the option of maybe doing modular construction. Once we go down and we lose that first floor flaming, because now we're going to be paying for the slab,
Gotcha.
we want to take advantage of that, so.
Okay, good. That was my first question. So the second question, on the sketches, which are fantastic, under scheme B, the lower one, I see some outdoor seating, and it looks like there's a pergola with maybe some ivy kind of growing above it. Is the idea to have seating under there, and then in from the area, just in from it? And I'm trying to match it with what I see here, and I see terrace and pergola.
Well, the community room projects out from the concession room, so it looks in 3 directions.
And then outside of
The pergola would come off that and be a sun-protected sitting area that would be kind of secluded a bit from the concession, and us old guys will sit there and read, and
A bit of a shaded area.
or shaded area.
And the other thought, Chris, is that might be something that could be done later if our budget is tight,
Right,
you know.
exactly.
But I think
We
that's
talked
great,
about that.
actually, and I think it's 420 square feet, so you put a few tables and chairs.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Ed?
Ed Johnson, trustee of the Bathing Beach. Compared to the present bathhouse, what was the height between the present bathhouse and this building?
Probably like
The height of the building?
Yes.
Ridge?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I'm
Take a
guessing
stab.
the existing one is about 11 feet, and this is probably going to be about 8 feet. Now, if we have to go up 30 inches, 8 feet, and then that's an 8, 12, another
10 feet.
10 feet or so. 22 feet.
22 feet, okay.
From the ground.
It depends on the roof pitch, but
Roof pitch.
it's going to look right and proportional.
Yeah.
But we'll say 20.
And this shows the existing bathhouse, and this is basically the roof plan for this building, just this option, so you can see the difference in the size of the footprint.
Oh, yeah, nice.
So, to the Harbor Development Committee, questions? We have not had as much of an opportunity to see some of the early planning and discussions that the Bathing Beach trustees had with their consultants and architects in terms of program, if
Right.
you will. You know, programmatically, what is it that this building is intended to do? I think the The session here has been very helpful in terms of giving a sense for the relative proportions of the concession portion, the bathhouse portion, and then the public meeting room portion. But Paul, Ed?
Are there handicap access ramps on both sides of the building?
Yes,
And then the bathroom, so they can get to the bathroom from the outside as well?
that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
You good? I have a question. Paul Lasordo, I'm Vice Chair, Harbor Development. So this is a question for Mr. Strukalowski. I like the siting because you seem to be putting it in what I call the swale area, which almost looks like it's not utilized that much. It seems to almost be wet during, times that it's wet, and it doesn't seem to be particularly used or useful in its present configuration, except it almost acts as an informal detention system.
It is a
Okay,
detention system.
so when you do that, and you either pave it or put an impervious surface to get up to it, and then the building itself is obviously going to eliminate some of that swale area, and it's great, it's out of the way, I get it, doesn't block views, I like that part. But when you do that, are you going to have to create a stormwater detention system in the parking lot that may end up needing to be done somewhere down the road anyway?
I think Gabe of CHA could probably best
Yeah,
address that
okay,
one, Paul.
Yeah, definitely stormwater management, particularly if the parking lot is expanded, is going to have to be addressed. It's required under the state.
And in layman's terms, Gabe, that means, drains and somewhere to, drain pipes to let the water go somewhere.
Gabe, would you
Correct.
mind pointing out on your site plan, though, where the existing swale, and your other
I'd
plan?
say this is you can actually see the swale.
It's still there,
We're
Paul.
not actually in the swale.
We're closer to 3A.
I get you.
And we were thinking we'd keep the parking lot on this side out of it so that the swale remains. We were contemplating having a connection from that, if it's sited here, that connects across. So all of that would have to be addressed. The building's gonna have to be addressed from runoff. We're gonna be doing soil testing and making sure that we can get it to infiltrate.
The last question, spin off from that. From a budget point of view, if they get tight on the money, can you defer the detention portion of it, stormwater detention in the parking lot upgrades, to a later date, or would some other town agencies make you do that all at once?
I think you really need to do it all at once as part of the project. Some of the things that we can consider as we move forward, though, that can be contemplated is any parking that's added could be pervious. It doesn't have to be paved. And when you can employ some of those low-impact development techniques, a lot of times we'll find areas to be able to, sides of the building where we can allow the roof runoff to come down and land in, landscape drip strips. Anything we can do from that perspective that's cost-effective but functional, we definitely need to strongly consider as we move forward.
Thank you. I don't know if the concept will pass muster with the public, but the team certainly passes muster with, in my opinion. Thank you.
Could I just add something about the functioning? Because with the increase in intensity of use, obviously, if the concession is a use the mic. If the concession is successful, there's going to be trash generated. So the trash removal and the containers are going to be a part of the siting, and the vendor is going to be responsible for dealing with trash. It'll be part of the RFP. And we've shown trash containers, the big dumpsters such as Stars and others use, incorporated in the building, so there won't be a dumpster on site. We're trying to get everything contained and hidden and organized.
The other thing I may point out I know one of the other members, on the budget point that Mr. Lasordo mentioned, and as far as how we're going to make all this work, the concept is at least to have an RFP out this fall. So if we have a respondent and we have a known idea of how much that respondent is going to pay, we have some idea if we go back to town meeting and say, look, we're going to be signing a lease that's going to generate Y in the way of revenue. Could we therefore generate, some more money? And if we're 100,000 or 150,000 short, I see Mr. Nancy shaking his head, but I think we want to at least know that. Our goal, and the reason we're looking at modular construction, is to bring this in on budget. And we've been on them, and we made that a priority with the architectural team. And by doing prefabricated sections even, or any things like that, we have a greater shot of doing that. But-
And by modular, I don't want,
Correct.
it's not the modular construction of the past.
Correct.
The techniques have really moved forward and really been able to specialize these things. And we're talking about panelizations of walls and stuff of that nature, trusses, roof trusses, that kind of.
Eric Cashel?
Eric Cashel, Harvard. On the second picture there, can you show this? You had, I can't tell if that's a parking lot or if that's,
This would, we were suggesting that may want to consider extending off of the end of this, with some feature that tied to the building if this was the selected location, tied back in for circulation.
Crushed stone is.
and what kind of material are you thinking of?
I was thinking crushed stone, shell, something of that nature that could be porous and not pavement.
Throughout the whole thing with the
Yeah.
circle as well?
Yep.
And then I had a question for you on, what type of time frame are you looking at for a return on this investment for building it?
As to the question of expanding.
Is that something you're thinking about, or
As far as, well,
where the break even is and then?
Ours or the vendor? Ours, this town or the vendor?
I mean, we're 850,000 is roughly.
State.
well, 700,000 is from the state. So the town's portion is 150,000. And we're optimistic that, I mean, we were going to get a return from Sullivan's when they were building a building. They were going to pay us somewhere in the range of, I think, $5,000 to $10,000 a year, but they were going to be out $850,000 to put up a building. So now we're out $850,000 putting up a building, and they don't have that debt service. We're assuming it's going to be a heftier number. And I also believe that there will be more competition. We won't get one vendor. I think by having this, we've heard informally from some other people who would be interested, some food vendors in Hingham, who I think this could be a secondary or third site for someone, who already may have kitchen facilities.
Is your revenue straight rent or rent plus a percent of the?
It's probably going to be straight. Well, we haven't written the RFP yet, but most likely it'll be structured where we would get a certain amount over the life term. We're going to have like a 25-year lease with some renewal options. And the idea would be, now they're going to have to outfit this themselves. So I wouldn't be surprised that some of the proposals are a little lighter in the first few years, where they're out $200,000 or $300,000 to outfit this building, which would then become fixtures. But that they may do that. So we'll have to see. I mean, the thing with Sullivan's was a different animal, But
Different model.
yeah, different model than what we're doing here. I guess with that, I'll entertain questions, again, specific if we could to their concept so far, and then we'll get general questions about the idea. Mr. Hersey?
First of all, I'm not for this at all. It started off with a concession stand. It started with an extra, a larger facility for the bathing beach, people that use it for bathrooms and so on and so forth. Now we get into a community room. It seems like something I wasn't ready for. And my biggest concern is when we bought the mobile station, we were sold on it because it was going to be open space and we're going to take down the building so we could see the harbor. Now we're going to put up a building over here so we can't see the harbor. Very concerned about that. I don't see how we're going to make a dime there with the overhead that this guy is going to encounter, the people coming off 3A, they're going to want to get down to Nantasket Beach, they're going to come back, they want to go home. I don't see anything draw there. Might be a few people from Hingham. As it stands now, I don't see a big, huge draw from the small coffee shop we have down there at the marina. Another concern is, how is this going to be used in the wintertime? Where's the snow going to go?
The idea is that this would still continue to be a snow farm area. So, but we may have some additional parking that will still be where it'll be used as a snow farm, most likely by the town.
Yeah. Even though we're getting this money from the state, it's still taxpayers' money, no matter how you look at it. I don't know what exactly the figure was to start off with this, the bridge to Whitney Wharf. But if I'm not mistaken, didn't it start off with about $300,000 to build that?
And it ended at 300,000.
That's what it cost.
That's the number.
Excuse me?
The end number was just over 300,000.
to build that Whitney Wharf Bridge?
Yes.
Well, I just got the figure from Sue Sullivan, and you can touch base with Sue Sullivan, okay? 1.288.413, $1,300,000. Yes. Yes, I just got that this week, okay? I asked her, what is the total cost to build that bridge? Almost $1.4 million, and that's not the lawyers involved.
I suggest we take this offline. That's not correct. I oversaw the contract. I know how much was spent. So that's not part of our discussion this evening. I'd be happy to speak with you after the fact.
I have a question about the site.
Yes, just introduce yourself first. If you
And
could come to
please
the
come up.
microphone, please, and thank you.
My name's Anne Marie Keene. I live in the Lincoln Historic District. That's a great map, I need that. So my two questions about the site are, we live in the neighborhood by the Derby Academy. We go to the beach all the time. We talk about the community. I'm very concerned because I think...
Could you please speak into the microphone? There's one right here. If you just want to sit down and you can... That's fine.
No, I'd like to point. Okay. My question is about the floodplain and the fact that you chose this site because it was closer to utilities on Ship Street. Well, there's people that live on Cole Street and also Burdett, which would be here. So if you built the site, which is called option 3, the utilities, I would imagine, would be right there, that you could bring them across the road from Burdett or Cole Street, and then you wouldn't have a floodplain issue, which I think would add to the cost of the site, because you've demonstrated that in your conversation. By the way, those are absolutely beautiful sketches of your design, but I think option 3, being on the knoll, makes more sense, and it would be less money for the town. And also, it would leave this grassy area here, and this option 2 is, to me, ridiculous, and so is option 1, because I think so many people in the town love to get their wedding pictures taken at the gazebo, and to destroy that whole area would be terrible to me. So is that an option, to bring the utilities from Cole Street or Burdett Street to build this smaller unit over here on the knoll? That's my question.
We can look into, we did look into how far we'd have to go for utilities that way and for the capacity needed. And I can re-verify that and ask the question specifically, but they were saying we were gonna have to go further up and cross, and we were dealing with the resource area issue of the coastal bank, which runs right through here. Which adds a complication, not saying it can't be done.
Is that because of bedrock? When you say coastal bank, is there
Oh,
bedrock?
no, so it's a coastal environmental resource line that runs along the bank here that then has a 100-foot buffer within it.
Okay.
That it just doesn't mean you can't do anything with it, it just means it's a higher level of scrutiny as you go through the Conservation Commission.
Well, I would think that building in the floodplain would be a very high scrutiny level for the Conservation
Yep.
Commission.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience? Yes? Yeah.
Joan Jovino, 8 Berkeley Circle. I have a question about the meeting room, and how will that be used by whom? And I also had a concern about the winter issue. Do we assume that we won't have a winter like we did 2 years ago when the parking lot is filled till May, and then that would be unusable? I mean, how much usage is planned for that meeting room? Thank you.
It's a good question. It's kind of, it evolved when we put the grant application in, and one of the issues of having it as a meeting room, its proximity to the gazebo is maybe beneficial. The room would be, hopefully could maybe even generate some revenue for like wedding showers or things of that nature. The idea is to have it open year-round, the concept is. But we clearly are going to have to look at where we keep the snow. Right now, the parking area we're talking about is not even, the parking area for this building is not parking now. And the snow is all kept to the water side of the drainage swale. and this building is to the 3A side of the drainage swale. So they don't necessarily have to conflict with one another. And the idea on who would use it, it's going to be a community room between probably the selectmen and the trustees. We'll have to come up with a policy of, just like we have people do functions at the bathing beach. They put a request in at the clerk's office. The trustees generally look at that as it's suitable. I think the Harbor Development Committee, the bathing beach trustees, and other maritime groups, I certainly could see that. I think the harbor master could do, boating things in a room like that. I think that's kind of what our thought process is, but it's really early. A very good question, but I think that has to be formulated a little further. But we see it as being a kind of multi-function type of room. Again, it's not that big. It's not going to be a wedding venue by any way, shape, or form, but somebody might have an anniversary party or something. If they had a request, we'll have to look at that, just like the selectmen doing requests for selectmen's parcels, to be used. We'd have to look at that and work it out with the town. The police chief will have input into that as far as, traffic generation, but a good question.
I would just add again, much of our work on the harbor has been informed by the survey that we did last year. 1,300 people responded to that survey. It related both to the transportation corridor, but also to harbor uses. And the kinds of programmatic things that have been thought of and engineered into this building as designed were responsive to that. And much of the call was yes for food on the harbor. So a concession stand is responsive to that. More kind of historical perspective on all of Hingham's history as bucket town and the fact that the harbor and the schooners were all part of that. Some of that, we've seen it done quite well at the shipyard in terms of the Second World War, but the more ancient history surrounding our wharves, there really currently is no indoor place to do that the town owns. So that's again one of the perspectives in terms of the meeting room.
Yes, Jim Watson.
Jim Watson, 291 Rockland Street. I'm very pleased to see the progress we're making. Lots of details can vary. I think the current site proposed, the proposed middle site, does make sense. It's a little more central to the two beaches, the Trustees Beach and the Selectmen's Beach. Even though I noticed DEM or DCR, somebody's put up signs at the end of the Selectmen's Beach saying no swimming, fishing and boating only, by which I guess they mean car top boats, because it's not the trailer area. So, that's a detail. I was a little surprised to see it the other day. I hope that you're right that the facility will be open year-round, because people, except when the snow makes it impossible, people like to go to the beach just to sit and read and look past the snow fence for when it's gone and see the harbor again. And it strikes me that with the location on 3A, the concession stand might work year-round. Easy place to pull into, get something and look at the water and go on. Except for during the snow storage period. And so I just would hope that there's one available bathroom year-round. The porta potty by the farmer's market is a nice blue, but it's not really a year-round facility. And it's very hard to change in there. And the other point was just, well, I guess you're going to talk about the inside design of the bathhouse later?
A little bit. If you have any specific questions, these are the guys to ask.
I don't know if you're getting to that after.
No, you can. Yeah, absolutely. It's an appropriate time.
One, I think lockers would be a huge benefit. But, you could bring your own lock. You have a place to put stuff, so you don't have to worry about it when you're at the beach. Second, a detail, but wooden slats on the floor that would let the water drip through so your clothes don't get soaked when you're changing would be helpful. And the third thing, which is, we've said before, the old idea of the black hose on the roof to the shower that warms the water is a very cheap way to warm the water.
Yeah.
But specifically, I just think that it's good to have some bathroom either accessible from outdoors or through the community room if it's open all the time, year-round. There'll be more questions later. Sure. But I think the evolution of this is good because you do have the two beaches, and it's not central, but it's a little closer to the midpoint of the two of them than it would have been. And in terms of view blocking, if you visualize going along 3A and looking at the view, there'll be one couple seconds where you're looking at the bathhouse, and then you're looking at the view over it or before it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's as much of a view blocker as the concrete wall by the town brook.
Yeah. Selectman McGann?
Just quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the committee. And I just wanted to be here tonight. I was fortunate enough recently to be positioned as a liaison with Harbor Development. So I saw that the meeting was coming up. I wanted to come here. This was very helpful to me to listen to the dialogue, to listen to all the residents. And I just want people to know that we work very cooperatively with the committees here on this issue. So we've been following it. And the selectmen take this issue very seriously. So I will bring back the information to the office, and we look forward to updates along the way.
Thank you. Thanks.
Selectman Gannon, I'd mentioned that Mr. Alexiadis has asked us, I think, to come before the selectmen in a September meeting on both this and a number of other topics, including the wharf study and so forth, that we will be before you in one way or another.
Well, I get the impression we'll be working on this over the next few months, so I look forward to seeing you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Sharkansky. Yes, Jim?
Jim Sharkansky, 32 Hancock Road. So a few questions. The site amongst the choices, I think is the best of the three. Obviously, I don't want to go into the grove and cut down trees and impede that way, and obviously in the middle of the lawn, I don't know how you get delivery trucks to and from. My concern is really this project is a balance between form and function. So originally, the function was important because you wanted to replace an ancient or an overused and underbuilt bathhouse that you currently have. And I understand that, it's a need. It's grown into something bigger, I think, than what is needed. I don't know about a function room with meetings. We have plenty of places in the town to have meeting. We, with CPC money, refurbished the Ames Chapel, and I don't know how much function of meetings they're having there at this point. Plus you have schools, you have a library, you have this building. There are a lot of places to hold meetings. I'm worried about the cost, not just to build it, but the operation, which adds to the town's budget, and operating another building. Being in the floodplain zone, the insurance is going to be very high. That alone. Operating the building itself and the grounds adds to an already strained operating budget of this town. We're not saying that we have a financial problem in this town, but it puts more burden on an already burdened operating budget. And I'm concerned about all that. I'm concerned about, again, the snow will be in the parking lot. It doesn't have to be like the snow we had 2 years ago, but a snow of an average winter, that parking lot is pretty much unusable, at least through till April. I'm concerned about, although it's the only logical place for it, a family on the beach and a child wants to go get something to eat, now going to cross a parking lot to get to the food, get to the bathroom. Has to be accompanied by an adult, or hopefully accompanied by an adult, but they're going to cross a parking lot for the most part to get to use the bathroom. The other concerns are, my experience at beaches, is bathhouses tend to attract a lot of sand, a lot of use of a lot of water. They get beat up a lot. I would rather have something that's more function-based than form-based. That, as nice as this is, I really just need, what I think the town needs at this point is just someplace where someone can use a bathroom that's functional all the time, maybe take a shower, and I'm talking about an outdoor shower, not any kind of locker rooms and storage of people's personal effects, just a quick outdoor shower to rinse off from the salt water and the sand, and that would be pretty much it. My other concern, as I said, was the cost, in operating it, not just to build it, but to operate it, and what that'll do to the town's operating budget. I'll probably have more questions later, but for now, they're nice buildings. The other thing is the profile of the building, because it is a scenic area. I would think as you blend it into the landscape, it lends to a lower profile. That the value is not of the building, but of the scene. And so I would like to drive by and see the water, see the land, or walk through and see the water and see the land, not see the building. Those are my concerns at this point.
Okay. On the budget issue, or actually the meeting room, that was partially driven by the state that it had to be more than just a concession and bathrooms. So the maritime history thing was an issue in the state application. And it's something that has evolved from the survey that was done to have a space that, celebrated the maritime history.
So it's a survey answered by 1,300 people of a town of 22,000. I don't think it's any kind of mandate of what needs to be done. But let alone, when you take state money, you become tied to their mandates and rules and regulations. So maybe we don't build such a nice building as it is, a great design, but we spend what we can of our own money, and we're not having to do all the things the state wants us to do because it's their money.
There aren't a lot of strings in this grant, though, Jim. I mean, we proposed to have this room, so it wasn't like the state said you have to have it. We proposed to have it because it has been something that somebody wanted. And I'm fairly confident that if we were able to get, $3,000 to $5,000 for a building somebody else was building, the concept is that, for a concessionaire is going to use, 1,200 to 1,300 feet probably in this building or thereabouts, that if you think what the value of on a road with 22,000 cars a day, and I disagree with Mr. Hersey as far as the viability of a business there. We had a vendor willing to do it and put up a building initially until he got into a few roadblocks. I think if you look at JJ's and Cohasset, and if that can survive, run 3A and does a viable business, that a location like this with 22,000 cars a day, parking lot with a capacity of 180 people, it's actually going to increase to close to about 210 cars, I think it's going to be very viable. And I think we'll have a number of vendors. I'm not saying your questions aren't well raised, but I think this can be a revenue-neutral building more than other buildings, and that's been a driving force. We don't have a big budget. We're not looking to have one for the trustees. We're looking for this.
JJ's is a seasonal building.
No, I understand.
That's it, with very little overhead and very little, they don't have rooms and other,
But I think this will be more attractive is what I'm saying. I think it will be more viable. People I haven't heard from yet, so John Thomas. Everyone will get a chance to speak again. I just want to speak.
Alan, excuse me, there was one other important thing for those at home seeing this later. The question Jim raised about children and access to this facility. I had had some conversations, I think, with some of these gentlemen, that there would probably be a pathway along the grassy edge of the selectmen's parcel leading to the building so that the primary access to this building would not necessarily be directly across the parking lot. The whole notion of having it be in the center is to allow access from a number of different directions.
human nature being what it is, people usually take the most direct route they can. It might be a lovely walkway, but most people, they can walk in a straight line, they're gonna go in a straight line.
John.
John Thomas, Stoddard Road. Past member of this board for 4 years, and I just want to give everybody a pat on the back, including the architects, the engineers, harbor master. I know you all well, and I know how hard it is to do what you're doing, and I think some positive comments are necessary to the public, to some people who think nothing but negative in this room. I think you don't have a better qualified group of people, engineers, architects, people that have known this work and do it as their livelihood. This is the best time to go forward. I like Mr. Trakowski's comments about it's a park ready to come into its own. Thank you.
I want to see if anyone has a first-time comment that hasn't spoken yet, John, and then I'll go to people again. Sir.
Charles Keene, 76 Lincoln Street. The gentleman back here with the white shirt on, I agree with him that do we really need beautiful structures like this when in fact it seems like a contradiction to what's been done recently, that being the refurbishing of the seascape. I see signs when I walk along there, pretty soon we're going to have seagrasses growing there. It's going to be a beautiful natural habitat. Why would we want beautiful, yes, but a large obstructive structure that blocks that view? Why not either take what is already there and reconfigure it in a minimal way to upgrade the utilities and have a better toilet, bathing, changing room. I would think that would be a more reasonable and from an environmental and aesthetic standpoint, preserving the seascape, which I think is a major issue there. If you need, I understand towns need income, why not charge people parking there? You know, Wellfleet, we had a house in Wellfleet. Whenever you went to the beach, we paid, I think it was $4 or $5 every time we parked there. Beautiful beach, wonderful beach, and they got some income. Why couldn't we do that here? As an alternate.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for first-time comment?
John, my parking can't be charged.
We've had a policy where we've received grants and other things like that to state money to do it, and Mr. Shakansky's point is that it does limit our ability to charge money, but for the most part, it is used on a year-round basis, and people right now bring lunch down there and eat their lunch there, you know, buy it somewhere else. And I believe that, you know, the architects for scale have tried to put this in the least obtrusive location possible. And again, if you actually stand, if somebody wants to go down there tomorrow and look back across 3A, for one thing, I wouldn't advise too many people driving down 3A to turn at a 90-degree angle and take a look at the view of the harbor as they're driving on 3A, for starters. But I also think if you look where it is, the area across is like the sanctuary, the bird sanctuary area, where there's no houses, it doesn't block a single vista that anyone has now, which I think is one of the biggest pluses of this location, is it has the least implications of blocking a view that anyone else has currently that can safely look at the harbor. And we've pulled it closer to 3A. Some people found that to be a fault. I think it's a plus, because the view from the gazebos are going to be exactly what it is now, and we've heard loud and clear the gazebo was sacrosanct, and we wanted to complement that, not to be a conflict with it. So that was kind of one of the driving forces. And the same thing with the Grove. We have a lot of people who treasure the Grove the way it is. You know, we have buses that come in of you know, senior citizens and others, and that's where they flock to on a hot day. It's heavily treed. It's the coolest place that the trustees have, and I think if we start getting into disturbing that, we're going to have bigger issues than we would if we settled it in a location as we're proposing. And this isn't set in stone by any means. It just seemed to be the best of alternatives if we're going forward with the project. Mr. Hurst?
Yes, John, here's one last thing. We bought the country club. How'd that work out? We were supposed to get $400,000 every single year. We haven't got that for the last 10 years. It's $400,000. That's a lot of money. We put money into the building, into the place now. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I don't want to monopolize, but you said 22,000 cars go by. You said 250 parking spaces. Right?
177
Okay,
right now.
177 right now,
Right.
but you said it was going to go up to over 200, didn't you?
Yeah, maybe about
Net
200.
increase of about 20.
20, about 200.
Now,
yeah.
these are for Hinghamtown residents? Because you say the community, and when you say community, to me, I'm a Hingham resident.
I understand.
I go to the beach all the time. Hardly anybody's from Hingham at that beach. They're non-residents. So our taxpayer money, I'm retired, our taxpayer money is going, and I don't want to be negative, and I don't want to be accused of being negative, but I'm giving another perspective here. Our taxpayer money is going to spend money on a beautiful building, yes, but to increase the number of people coming to our beach. It's going to be like Nantasket Beach. I've been to Nantasket Beach. Cohasset has a beach. How come Cohasset residents can only go to the Cohasset Beach? I mean, why can't, when we moved here, one of the perks was that we had a town beach. It's not a town beach anymore. And you've spent a lot of money rehabbing it to make it more environmentally beautiful. But the sign that's out there, I mean, you think you could have afforded to put a new sign?
We are planning to put a new sign. We had a lot of things on our plate this year, ma'am, and that is one of the things that we wanted to do. We didn't have time to address it this year.
Okay, but it looks terrible.
I understand
from
that.
From an aesthetic point of view.
I fully agree with you.
This is beautiful and aesthetically pleasing, but I'm just saying, we go to the beach all the time, and we're one of the few Hingham residents. In fact, enough said.
Thank you.
I think Kate Boland had her hand up on Street.
Anyone? Yes. And then you, Jim. No, it's fine. No, you haven't spoken yet, so we want first-time people.
Kate Boland, 338 Main Street. I do, every time I come around, it's kind of trite, but I always go, aren't we lucky to live in this town when you see the vista? And ideally, I'd love it to be off a little bit, but I love the whole seashell idea. I like that you're not pushing the macadam onto the green space. And I think it's going to be an asset, I hate to say. I think, not hate to say, but my husband and I had our dinner there tonight. And it was really nice to see a few people that were from our town having dinner there too. Right. So, thank you.
Thank you. Jim, you had another question?
Jim Watson, I just forgot one small point somebody else made. Outdoor showers are a great thing. And if they're like the ones at Nantasket with the spring-loaded faucet, there's no water waste issue because it's only on as long as you're holding it. But the times you just want to run in and get showered off and go sit on the beach. Secondly, on the question of who uses the beach, there's only one ocean. And I think, I grew up in North Quincy with Wollaston Beach, and the idea that you go to a beach and keep away people that aren't from your neighborhood, very sad. And, I do go to the town beach a lot, and I see people I know, I see people I don't know. I've talked to strangers on occasion, and it's been all right. So I wouldn't worry very much about overuse. I think it'd be a great success.
I have a comment here.
Yes. Oh.
Listening to the comments about the view and building it all, I think that the committee, the Harbor Development Committee, and I know the Bathing Beach trustees consider very seriously the idea of building anything. I know there's a balance between green, which is really great, and whatever we do, whether we're asked to deal with the concept of expanding the rowing center that might involve more parking, overdevelopment is always a concern. So we've taken that into consideration, and to the degree that nothing, you want nothing, you can't compete with nothing. But to the degree that we've taken into consideration, I think the trustees and their citing with the architects and the engineers have probably found the one spot with the least impact. And from my observation, I live on Otis Hill. I didn't grow up on Otis Hill, but I've lived there for almost 20 years. I grew up more in the middle of Hingham. And from my recent observations over the last 5 or 10 years, I think the Hingham Bathing Beach is an underutilized asset. Other than the farmer's market or a really hot day with a high tide that coincides with the afternoon, it's tide dependent. Unlike other beaches, unlike Gun Rock or, the ocean beaches, it's tidal dependent. Unlike the beaches that this gentleman worked in Falmouth, where you have a 2-foot tide. We have a big tide, and I don't think you want to go swimming or try to find water at Hingham Bathing Beach at low tide as a former lifeguard, So I think that we have an underutilized asset, except when the farmer's market is there. I guess revenue is important, but that's a separate component. If it's underutilized, how can you make the experience more enjoyable? How can you attract people there, whether it's a swing set that won't, it's another issue that might come up in another meeting, playground, whether, somewhere to go to the bathroom, whether it's somewhere to go and change, as Jim said, I guess, whether it's to get your child a hot dog. I don't want to turn into Nantasket Beach either, no disrespect to any Hull representatives that are watching on TV, but there's already Nantasket Beach. We don't need another one. I'd just like to see the parking lot a little fuller. I'd like to see Hingham people and neighborhood people able to get there easier, have something more there, even if the tide's not perfect. And we're trying to, I think the committees are trying to find that balance that everybody's been talking about. But everything that everybody says certainly resonates.
Yes, sir? Yeah, you haven't spoken yet, so.
Greg Lane, I live in Crow Point, actually down the street from Paul. I think to piggyback on Paul's points, and I've heard from other people in the audience, there are a lot of great neighborhoods in close proximity, including our neighborhood. And I think one of the biggest problems is actually connectivity. So curious if these folks have actually thought about that, or how that's going to be addressed.
Very good question. Your timing's perfect. The CPC, I get you, Jim. The CPC applications are due tomorrow. And the Bathing Beach trustees and the Harbor Development Committee are both looking to expand the boardwalk, the paver boardwalk that the trustees put in this year and theirs. Ours heading towards Otis Hill, along the top of the revetment, and the Harbor Development Committee going across what we call the Selectmen's parcel, the gazebo parcel, heading towards the boat ramp parking lot. Because we've heard that loud and clear, The preliminary applications are due tomorrow. The formal ones aren't due until October, but we understand that, and that was a big part of the whole plan. And to what Bill Reardon had pointed out, even this building would be tied into that walkway system. So we do see it as part of a bigger picture. And we mentioned in the earlier meeting the trustees had when we were talking about our end of that, is that this may be an alternative also for the state as they're looking at that 3A corridor, that if we can create places for pedestrians and bicycles that's safely off of 3A, it gives them more flexibility in the corridor itself, because the new roadway programs try to design bikeway access, safe bikeway access and pedestrian access. And I've told people this, if you were coming down off Otis Hill and heaven forbid had a baby carriage and wanted to walk your dog at the same time, as you're facing traffic, it's got to be one of the most daunting things possible. The other horrible area is when you get to the rotary, you know, right now, where you have a guardrail on one side and traffic and people coming around the rotary at like 45 miles an hour. John Thomas has pointed that out a number of times. So those are two choke points, but we're hoping that eases it. Long answer to your question, that if we can do these walkways, that it may give more flexibility to the corridor work for 3A, and they'll show we're doing our part. To Jim's point about working with the state, we want to show we're doing our part of trying to work with them. If we're going to try to get state money to redo 3A, that we're trying to work with them on the pedestrian access.
Another little bit of context, Mr. Lane, on this one. The town approved $400,000 for engineering work on the Route 3A corridor in 2015. And part of that work is design of landscaping along the harbor. There's a portion that's been allocated. We're trying to use that and accelerate the timing of that so that we would begin to incorporate exactly this extension of the harbor walkway, akin to the Boston Harbor walkway, if you know about that. It's just there's so many moving parts here that can connect. The trouble is keeping them all moving simultaneously, and yet being responsive to the interests of the public. It's a real challenge.
Yes.
Joan Yovino, Berkeley Circle. Observation and question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you planning to greatly limit the access of kayaks and shells to the water from the harbor? And my observation is this. About a month ago, I went down, I row regularly, and there was a big sign at the edge of the boat ramp explaining all the regulations. Boating ramp, terrific. And I was told that they were also putting new signage along the highway edge of the parking lot to make sure that cars with trailers, boat trailers, parked there, because on the weekends, I guess it gets pretty messy. Came down a few weeks later, and now there are these big metal poles with signs. Now, one sign says boating access. The sign below it says no swimming, and there's an arrow. I guess it's pointed to the boat ramp, but I really don't know what that means. Plus, it also eliminates those of us trying to get boats off our cars. So now we have another 3 or 4 spaces less. I'm not a big person, and so I pull my, and I go in the morning. I don't go when there are a lot of people there. So there's that point. The other point is for swimmers and people that use the beach. Tide is about 3 hours on either side, and then you're in the silt.
That's why our lifeguards are there those hours. Exactly.
But also, I've noticed when often as the tide is coming in, people come down, they can't use the water because of the heavy silt content and foam, which is just part of the natural in and out of the tide. So how many people actually use it as a bathing beach? Is it the plan to use it more for something else, other recreation? But the boat issue, for me, certainly is an issue, and I don't know if anyone else has found that, because it's very difficult to get
so happens the harbor master is here.
Ms. Jovino, this has been a subject of frequent conversation, and the harbor master, Ken Corson, is here and can give our responsibilities from the state's perspective, because the state does control that transportation lot. So, Ken, if you'd step to a mic, perhaps over there.
Sure. So I wrote down, tried to write down quickly all your questions there. There are a number of new signs down at the boat ramp parking lot. These were put in by the Public Access Board, which works jointly with the town to help manage the parking lot and the ramp. You mentioned that there were signs along the waterfront there that spoke to, boating access, and there was the arrow, no swimming. So basically, what you have along the waterfront there are some signs that are restricting that parking area there, basically to people that are accessing the water for boating. So we're not looking to restrict any kayaking or rowing type activities. It's actually reserving that area for people that want to access the water with a car top type boat.
Could I respond to that?
Sure.
I understand that, but now with all these posts, there's that many less spaces to bring your boat up to the edge of the beach and be able to take it off your car without having to take it across the front.
I see. So you're saying that the actual post.
The posts are in the way because now we also have trash barrels and posts.
So I think there's probably about 3, maybe 4 at the most posts.
Right, plus the trash barrels. So
Yep.
there's 3 of those, so that's 6 spaces right there that.
So I think that most people that are using the parking lot to access the water with a rooftop boat should be able to work around the three signs. I mean, we do need to have signage up so that people can understand what the rules are and the regulations. That's one of the challenges there, is that parking gets used for activities that aren't related to the harbor, and then the people that want to come down there and launch the boat don't have any spots. So I think that the signage is necessary. Maybe it might complicate 3 actual parking spots, but they are important and necessary, and the state really wants to see them. The no swimming is because you can't swim within a certain number of feet of the boat ramp. So that sign is there to indicate that from that sign where it says no swimming to the right, you can't swim on that section of the beach.
I understand, but those no swimming signs go all the way down to the grass, I believe.
I don't think so. There's
one sign with an arrow pointing to the boat ramp.
There's one sign with an arrow pointing to the boat ramp, and I guess it could be confusing. Maybe someone thinks that means you can't park there if you're swimming. Maybe that's what you were implying. I'm not really sure.
It doesn't look very clear. I don't take care of myself, but it just doesn't look clear.
Well, I can take another look at that and see if there's anything we do to make it a little bit more clear, but we do have a lot of kids that wander into the boat ramp area, and that's very dangerous for the kids to kind of get in there. So we do need to have some signage there to inform them that, or at least the parents, that you can't be swimming from that post to the boat ramp for the most part. So I think I've answered all the questions. We're not looking to limit the amount of kayak or, rowing shells that want to use the harbor. We're actually looking to allow people to access it. I explained the no swimming. And again, the signs were put in by the Public Access Board a number of weeks ago, mainly to address the concerns and some of the issues that the town has had in that boat ramp parking lot.
Okay, if I could, Chairman Reardon of the Harbor Development, they have another meeting, the rest of their agenda to go over. This is the first time we've had a public input on this, the first of many. We had an opportunity, HCAM told us we'd have an availability to have this on HCAM tonight, and we decided that just came out in the last 2 days. We plan to have other meetings after Labor Day. We thought this was early, but get the best coverage we can, and there will be further input from this, and having the engineers and the architects hearing things. We'll have another meeting probably, if not later in September, by October, at which point we may be talking about some of the logistics of an RFP for a concessionaire and how that's going to work, and starting to look at some of the number issues a little harder. But we certainly have heard everyone's questions, and there'll be more opportunity to do this. But I think with that, we'd like to close this section of the meeting so that the Harbor Development can continue on. But we thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're certainly welcome to stay, but we're going on to other business of the Harbor Development Committee. So if some are leaving, I'll hold for a minute just to let others step out. This is just the agenda. This is the next topic, which is goals for the Harbor Development, possible goals for the Harbor Development Committee. So if I could ask people to take their conversations out into the hallway. Is this on? Yeah. Gabe.
Where's the gavel?
We don't have one normally. So if we could get started again. We've briefly discussed already CPC applications, Community Preservation Committee applications. They are due on a preliminary basis tomorrow. And we had had a conversation earlier in the July timeframe involving both the Harbor Development Committee and the Bathing Beach Trustees. As Alan mentioned, John Thomas, could we keep the conversations down? I want to keep rolling here. We'd had the conversations in terms of a number of alternatives for community preservation. I see Carol is here, so I just wanted to give you some context. There were a number of different alternatives and different styles of requests that might have been part of this year. I think both committees are sensitive to momentum and a feeling that we're sort of addressing the harbor initially from west to east, and there's a flow here where a lot has happened on the Bathing Beach portion. We have met recently with the state, and we have opportunities for perhaps medium-term attention to the boat ramp area. So the notion of opportunistically moving forward to put the pieces together for a harbor walkway was very appealing. At the same time, I think, Carol, you're aware that we are also working with Presley and Associates, a landscape design architect firm, who were chosen by DCI, the principal contractor for the $400,000 engineering corridor study. So the notion of bringing all of this together, updating the master plan with Presley sooner than later, and incorporating notions like the continuations of the harbor walkway, what kind of materials, what kind of seating, what kind of shade structures, plant materials along the way. You know, trying to bring all of this together in a reasonably short time frame to take advantage of the momentum that we have. So what Alan's committee, and Carol, I don't know whether you were here at the Bathing Beach trustee portion of the meeting, they went ahead and voted to proceed with a preliminary application tomorrow. And we are going to have a discussion now, just in terms of confirming the discussion we had in July, that the Harbor Development Committee would also proceed on the same basis. We do need to vote. So I asked Alan. Alan had done some preliminary work in terms of cost, which is at this juncture is an estimate. It's a range, but he has very good basis for doing that because we've had quotes on the Bathing Beach parcel for the brickwork that was done there of about the same distance, both in the Grove area for the Bathing Beach trustees and the what are we calling it? The Selectmen's parcel,
right?
The gazebo parcel.
So, Mr. Chairman, for my purposes and those people at home, if we're still on TV,
we are.
The distance that the new brick walkway at the Bathing Beach is approximately the same as across the Selectmen's parcel. So we're talking about bringing that walkway across the Selectmen's parcel to at least the point where the boat ramp parking lot begins?
Correct.
And what was the budget that Alan had given you for that?
His estimate, because the distances of what was been done and what's going to be done in the Grove and this are all fairly similar, is $100,000 to $125,000.
So our section, the section we're doing, is $125,000.
Yeah.
And even though we all expressed, I think, support for the concept of building it, would we be using the similar, I know there's been a lot of talk about trying to use harmonious materials to other sections of the walkway. Are we going to make it look similar to what's already at the Bathing Beach?
That's the intent, but as I mentioned, we hope to be engaging during this
Right.
cycle, if you think about the cycle ending at town meeting next spring, to engage Presley and our landscape architects.
So my last question is, where's the money coming from?
For this?
For
This
that,
will be-
just that portion?
There's going to be a request to community preservation tomorrow.
Okay, and that seems consistent with what we've talked about as a committee at other meetings that weren't televised. Okay, fine. I'm up to speed now. Thank you.
Okay. So if, is there further discussion? This is a revisit to our discussion in July. We just have a little bit better sense of the numbers. Is there discussion among the committee members of further discussion on this item?
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Before we vote, because again, this is a public meeting, are there questions from the public about this matter? Okay. Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I would move that we file the application with...
Preliminary
application with
CPC.
CPC to fund the construction of the walkway across the so-called selectmen's parcel.
Okay. Is that seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good. So the next topic on our agenda, it's 8:30. For the public, just to have a sense, I'm hoping that this agenda would be completed within an hour at the outside. Depends a little bit on this next topic. I sent this afternoon, well, let me back up. In context, at our July meeting, we decided to begin the conversation about goals and objectives for this committee for this coming year. And we literally just went around the room and had each member speak to what they believed a priority ought to be. That was captured by a couple of people. Thank you, Vice Chair Lasordo, for sending your copy of it to me. And it was Ed Morris, our secretary, had also captured it in the minutes that we approved earlier. Yesterday, I took all of those listings and tried to sort of cram them down into, because a number of them were repetitive in the sense that there were different ways of speaking to it. And I listed them out as nine different initiatives. And I did that with the intent that this evening we could talk a little bit further about what some of those initiatives are, and akin to the way that we addressed the wharf issue in terms of what we thought the major priority ought to be, that we would literally prioritize individually and then bring those together and do the math and make a comparison and see if we can't come up with sort of a matrix consensus on what seemed to be the most important. So I made copies for each of us. If you didn't make them this afternoon, I have one of my own, so, okay. You set? And the other thing I tried to do with these was to indicate, this is a matrix that shows the 1 to 9, and then the second column is capital, or what I've called admin, or sort of current expense, as opposed to we got to go out and get funding to make this happen. Many of these fall in the capital column, if you will. The next column of this matrix, I showed the term. You know, how proximate are these? Some of them are very long-term. Some of them are medium-term. Some of them could be quite short-term. And it seems to me that probably enters into our prioritizing a little bit as well. And then the final column was just the description. And for the audience, I'll just give you a sense of what some of these are. They're not in order, because we're going to talk about the order now. One is the whole wharf survey progress, including a strategy regarding Barnes Wharf, which is an issue for the town because of the ongoing lease negotiations. 2, the boat ramp replacement, which was the subject of part of our session at our last meeting when we had a meeting with the representatives from the Public Access Board. 3, a better connection between the harbor and downtown, and how to continue to explore that as part of the 3A transportation corridor. 4, at the request of, this happened to be a harbor master's suggestion, how do we increase transient boater access? Have more boats coming into the harbor to get to downtown, but they need certain services like baths and bathrooms and showers and that kind of thing. 5th, extending the harbor walkway. Ultimately, all the way from the bathing beach, or if you might say from Otis Hill to Steamboat Wharf. 6th was initiating the next harbor dredging cycle. We typically dredge every 10 to 12 years. It's been about 9, but we're already seeing stress in the basin in terms of certain areas of the basin that are filling in. So we've asked the harbor master to explore how quickly we can move on that. 7th was updating the landscape architectural plan, master plan, and that would be done in conjunction with the Route 3A corridor, traffic corridor engineering. I want to emphasize that that's part and parcel. We're clearly going to be doing that. The town is spending $400,000. Roger Fernandez is working very hard with both DCI and Presley and several other firms. That's ongoing, but again, it's a question of how do we spend our time and our priorities. Final 2, there was a suggestion we need to solicit increased public access and participation in our processes. Tonight is a perfect example. We're on HCAM. Others can see this at another time, and that's a great way of doing it. We've done this twice before, and we will continue to, probably not every meeting, but selectively choose meetings that seem to make sense, where there's a lot that's been sort of brought together and we can inform the public. And finally, develop a revised mooring regulation, which the town has not updated since when, Ken? 2010?
Yes, that was the last time that they were adopted.
So that's a pretty wide span in terms of, and it gives the public and those here a sense of how much we get involved in different aspects of the harbor. I put to my fellow committee members the issue of how do we, reach some priority of that on those. And what I guess what I'd like to do is for a few minutes, just again go around the room and seek either commentary. This is arbitrary. I tried to do it in a way that was, I think, reasonably straightforward. I think I've captured the sense of our discussion at the last meeting, but I welcome commentary. Paul, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you've done a great job, crystallizing all the things that the committee has talked about over the last 2 meetings, especially the last one. I think that the prioritization is going to differ from member to member, but it does, the 9 items, I think, does adequately reflect, I think, everybody's own individual priority items. My own priorities would have, I couldn't even discern between the top 3, but they would be continuing to connect through the walkways, all these wonderful things that we're building at the harbor, but all the things that currently exist to connect them. So item 5 for me is still a top priority. WAF survey is certainly a top priority, and I hadn't thought of it until other members of the committee had raised it, but connecting to the downtown area, I can understand where that would be a top priority.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, I think everything is an important priority, but on top priorities, that's really all. That is just my 2 cents on that topic.
Ed, do you want to add anything in terms of your perspectives?
Well, I just agree that we need to have a safer access from one end of the harbor to the other. And we've done that with the bridge and, continue to do that with the paths and the walkways that connect all the way down.
Okay. Eric?
I thought it was interesting, some of the comments that the public had, so I think it's good to get the public involved in understanding what we're doing as well and solicit their input. But no, I think that there's a lot of things here. It is hard to figure out which one is top priority.
Brian?
I think this is a great exercise and very interesting to see it all laid out. So thank you for doing that.
Just trying to be a picture's worth 1,000 words.
No, it's great. And I think connectivity and the ability to actually get to a safe harbor that's attractive is very important. So this is great.
So let me get the sense of our group here. 2 of our members are missing, and they're not able to participate in this. One thought I had was to ask each of you to do this and send it to me. I'll have to check whether, from an open meeting perspective, I could independently reach out to the other 2 members who are not here to just share their perspective, and then I could come back at our September meeting and summarize what appeared. If you just remember how we did it with the wharfs? We literally went 1, 2, 3, 4, everybody voted, and then we added up the numbers and saw which ones came out on top.
I have another alternative,
Okay.
if I might. And that is simply that we vote with the quorum that we have now to adopt these as our priorities. And whether we refine that or not would need to be the topic of another meeting or two. I'm not sure we need to do that. I think that as issues come up and as the public expresses their concerns, as funding becomes available, I believe the prioritizations will change, not just within the committee, but within our own minds. So I don't know if an exercise to narrow it down beyond that at this point, Mr. Chairman, is particularly necessary. And to at least get these 9 items voted as our goals for 2017 might bring us part of the way that you want to help this committee go. That would be my thought.
I guess my perspective is, having been chair now for 2 years, is that there's a lot on the plate, and that if we don't begin to prioritize somewhat in terms of saying what is it that we are going to put, first and second and third, and my sense is you to have 9 priorities doesn't really, you don't really have any priorities. I mean, yes, there are other things that aren't listed here that we could also be doing. I just believe that, and again, whether that's at this meeting or at a subsequent meeting, to have some sense for where are we going to place our emphasis. Now, we've also talked about ways in which we can achieve more of our priorities, such as delegating, and I almost added the column that said, member responsible, because that's the next step.
I'll give you a very specific thing then. If you moved Extend Harbor Walkway, because I share Ed's concern that creating a safe walkway for people, not just for aesthetic reasons, but so kids can get safely from the rowing center around the harbor to wherever they're being picked up or wherever that they have to go. I think that extending the harbor walkway to the degree that that also involves safety as well as aesthetics just needs to move up a couple of notches. And with that,
This isn't in order. This is not in order. The whole intent is that we would
I'm sorry.
see member ranking 1 to 9.
I thought the
We
chairman
would
had
vote.
made suggestions on this.
No. I just laid them out in a logical sequence. There's no intention as to order.
Okay.
None.
You want to vote tonight?
I would like to suggest that people take the time, and it can be now for a few minutes, or it could be sending it back to me, and I would summarize it for our next meeting, just as I put this summary together.
I can do the second, but I'm not sure I'm ready to do the first.
You're not ready to do it now?
No.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah, I think it's.
That's fine.
a good
The
idea.
whole point is this was intended to be a teaser, but to cause us to think in some sort of logical, prioritized way about how we go about this. And I think to target that at our next meeting, we would try to do this. Mr. Lasordo, you're having to take your leave as you mentioned. Yes. So thank you for your suggestion. So but Paul, I would look for that in the next few days. Your response, okay? Very good. So if we take that approach, let's go on then to our recurring items, and this will go quicker for those left here in the room. Under recurring matters, open issues, the first is an update on the Phase 2 of the Beals and Thomas work on the wharf survey. Mr. Sharkansky is left, but I have agreed with the advisory committee to meet with them on September 14th. They want the results of our vote at the July meeting when we voted in terms of which wharf we believe should come first. But as we also agreed, I would try to express to them our interest in moving forward with not just one wharf, but because the costs are so relatively nominal on an increased basis, to move forward with perhaps all of them. We'd need some more money to do that. But that's the intent. There's nothing more. At this point, Beals and Thomas is not proceeding down a path yet. But because we need to sort of socialize with the advisory committee and ultimately with the selectmen in terms of how we use the remaining money that we originally obtained from the town at 2015's annual meeting. Remember, it was 175,000. We've used about 50 to date in the survey work that's been done, so we have about 125,000 left. So that's where that stands. The Whitney Wharf Bridge, just a quick update. York Bridge Concepts will be mobilizing next week to come back and finish their work. You remember that they do a treatment. It's a stain-like thing. I don't think it's colored, but it protects the wood. And given the dry summer we've had, normally it would be 6 months before they would do that, but it's been so dry that bridge has dried out. Even though it was originally sort of raw yellow wood, it has dried out very rapidly. So they're coming next week. Nick Bond and Bob Weeks at 3A at Red Eye Roasters are aware of that, and I think that would complete York's contract with us when they do that. Is anyone aware of anything else that we think needs to be done to wrap that project up? I'm not aware of a punch list. I will do this with Roger Fernandez when he is back next week. But Ken, anything you're aware of?
Nothing that
I'm not. They were very thorough before. We had a pretty good punch list when they left. The other interesting update is there was a first meeting of the 3A Corridor Transportation Working Group last week on August 10th. Deirdre Anderson, who's listening on the phone, was able to attend that meeting. She sent me some notes. This is the initial cuts of some of the concepts that DCI is putting forward. They are the principal engineering contractor to design this roadway for proposal to have state funding and actually do the work. They started at the east end, coming up over the Summer Street Hill, down Summer Street to the Rotary, and have covered to probably the intersection with North Street. They haven't gone much further than that at this point. What was fascinating to both Deirdre and I was, you'll remember that when we saw this, I think it's called the CTPS traffic study, they had said they believed it was possible that Summer Street could be reduced from 2 lanes each way to 1 lane each way, that the numbers it was possible to do that. And it's interesting that DCI has looked at that, has analyzed it further, and has come forward with a design that does, in fact, reflect only 1 lane each way on Summer Street, with a median strip and with much wider both bikeway and walkway. That's not, obviously these are preliminary, and it's early days. Also, I would note that what they did provide was a so-called modern rotary, akin to the one in Situate, nowhere near as wide as the one that we have today, which has given rise to so many accidents. That's not the only treatment. You may remember that the CTPS study showed as another alternative a signalized T, with Route 3A coming down, stopping at a light, and taking a left or a right. And similarly, if traffic was coming down Summer Street, there would be a light. Whether they believe that by providing this other rotary version first, that is their preferred. I was not at the meeting. We're going to have another meeting in September. I'll know more. But I was encouraged. I know that there's a very strong neighborhood sentiment on Summer Street and in the World's End area, hoping to deal with some of this traffic safety issues on Summer Street. And I think this initial design would be very responsive to that. So that was encouraging. Ken, I asked you if you'd update us quickly on 2 matters that we voted on at our last meeting. One was we did meet with the Public Access Board representative, Doug Cameron, and he has advised that there is engineering money to begin to design a replacement for the boat ramp, which is long overdue. We'd still have to then get funding to build it, which might take a number of years, but that was one. And then the second was moving forward on the dredging, which may need to happen sooner. So if you would give us a what update you can.
Sure. So I don't have a whole lot to update on either of those, but I did reach out to Jack Shepherd of the Public Access Board to let him know of our decision about which type of float system the town would like to entertain. So they're aware of that, and they're starting to put things together.
Okay.
I did follow up. I did reach out to Kevin Mooney regarding starting the dredging process, but he has not been available at the moment. So again, there's no real progress there, but I'll keep communicating with both of them and try to get the ball rolling.
Okay. Mark Terrell left at a very inopportune time, but I will just update briefly. There have been 2 sessions with the Hingham Recreation Department. Is he right outside the door? Thanks, Chris. We'll wait just a second. This involves Hingham Rec, so he's patiently waited for all of this time. Do they turn the air conditioning off in this building after?
Pretty warm.
I think so.
Yeah.
A lot of hot air was in here before, though.
So, Mark, we brought you back because way down on the agenda, it said Harbor Play Area Update, Hingham Rec. So I just wanted to let people know that I had participated in an initial session with the Recreation Department. Mark was there, Vicki Donlin as chair of the Rec Commission was there, with a fascinating consultant, Nancy White, from, she's not really from the state. She represents DCR as a play area inspector for the state, and has inspected, I think she said, Mark, something like 150 play areas around the state. So she's very knowledgeable, and I want to share with the other committee members, and I did this as well with Alan Peralt, who was, we'd all had an initial presentation, and I think there was some sort of toing and froing a little bit in terms of, well, gee, is that going to be right? The same kinds of questions we had tonight about, would it impact the viewscape and all of that? So Vicki has emphasized to us, as she did to Bathing Beach trustees, look, it's early days. These are concepts. We're preliminary. We need to explore this. And I certainly agree with her that in terms of, for example, meeting with Presley on a landscape design, you want to think about all the elements that you want in the harbor, whether that's a transient boating facility on the mobile station parcel, whether that's a bathhouse snack shack, or whether it's a play area. You want to get those on the table so that we talk about them. What impressed me about this consultant was she saw the site and she just seemed to get it, real fast in terms of, boy, there are some special things here that we don't want to mess up. So the notion of doing something in the Grove, she had no interest in. That's sort of hallowed ground. That's the quiet area where people go. Similarly, in terms of the height of equipment that might be used, she's very into, keeping it down. So for example, the bandstand used by so many wedding groups, the locations that we talked about, would not impact that viewscape at all. So again, early days. I'll let Mark speak to technically kind of where we are, but with Vicki Donlin, whom I met with after the meeting, I certainly indicated my willingness, as I did in writing, and reflecting our discussion, that these conversations should begin, and we need to begin to have something to look at, and that's exactly where the Rec Commission seems to be going.
Sure, yeah, so just a quick update. Rec Commission is simply advocates for a play area down at the harbor, and what they're thinking of. Still, we have no design to show the committee here tonight. As Bill mentioned, we met with Nancy White of Playground Inspections Incorporated. She had just emailed me a couple play components that she thought would seem reasonable down at the harbor, and I did print those out. I could pass them out to you.
I was going to send that along, but I thought you might bring them tonight. So I have one, so we can just share with the other members. What was interesting, Mark just sent these this afternoon, and and I'll get copies to the other members as
So
well.
the rec commission hasn't even seen these play components other than the chair, Vicky Donlin. I haven't even got a chance to show the rest of the 4 members, but, and again, these are just simple concepts that may be included or may not be included, just to get people's thoughts on it. The rec commission is well aware that, they certainly don't have any jurisdiction at the harbor. So whatever is proposed, they want it to be fully supported by the harbor development and the Bathing Beach Trustees. And they're also well aware that there's definitely a balance between preserving that landscape and offering some amenities down at the harbor. They're just really hoping that they can strike that balance and still be able to offer a simple play area down there.
What I saw in these sketches was just an awareness. We had emphasized as a committee, let's work towards some nautical themes, and there are these are examples of things that have been used in other play areas around New England, and it was indicative of the kind of things that we could begin to see. And again, you'll notice that most of them are quite low impact, not great big tall structures. Even the swing component, Nancy had ideas in terms of how to minimize the height of that so that we're not impinging on the viewscape. So I was encouraged, but it's early days. I mean, I think that you and the Bathing Beach Trustees are kind of, and we are all working toward at different paces with projects, all of which need to try to come together. And we're working on this together, and I look forward to doing it going forward.
Thank you.
Questions from other members of the committee? Okay, and there were a couple of members of the public there, and a representative from the farmers market who was not thrilled at the notion, was very open about that, but we engaged in some conversation, this Mark Cullings, afterwards. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you for your time.
Glad you were able to stay for that. So we can wrap up here, I think, very quickly. Other matters that I'm aware of, I did send today, there's a conflict of interest seminar that is done annually. Some of us, as David Basler pointed out, it's not a requirement, but it's suggested. And I think there are 2 times, both on the same day. And I'm trying to remember, yes, it's September 13th. So 4:30 and 7 o'clock here in Town Hall on the 2nd floor. I plan to come just in terms of, is there anything new? We explored, you remember one earlier topic of cell phone usage as part of public meetings, and that's a conversation I'd really like to engage with this fellow from the state, because the town has opportunities to do more of that, and there seems to be some reticence in the selectman's office, and I just want to try to have that engagement, because some of our members travel, and there are times when it would be useful, certainly done in the corporate world. Whether the public meeting law changes how that plays out is another matter. So the last item I'll just mention is I did send out a revised roster. That was reflective of all the changes that everybody gave me. I did reach out to the advisory committee and I updated their membership. I think I've got everything current. Please take a look, and if I got something wrong, come back to me so we can get it sorted out and everyone's got a current version. Very useful in terms of in reaching out for meetings and time-sensitive matters. So we're down to the hard core here of the public, but this is the item that says questions from the public, if we haven't covered the territory in our meeting.
Where did you put Barnes Wharf? I missed the last one.
Barnes Wharf, in the vote that we took was, and this was I tried to explain, Rosamond, that we laid out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and asked each member to prioritize where they thought it ought to be, and then we literally just did the math. And Town Pier came out number 1, and Barnes Wharf was second. Okay. So in terms of, but that came along with an emphasis from the committee to go back to the town, and this will first be with the advisory committee, to say, look, we have a number from Beals and Thomas to do this phase 2 complete engineering work and design on all 4 wharfs of only I say only, $260,000. We have 120. Instead of doing just one now and then going on and asking, for more and 3 and 4, the consensus of this group was we really want to urge the town to take the step forward, get to phase 2 so that we're shovel-ready when and if there is state funds available so that we could go for the big picture. So that's the thrust. Okay? Kate, any other?
No, I came really, the playground was my concern. I thought it was going to be like another big Bethel, and I really like the lower just play areas and keeping it very low key, not like another huge playground.
Okay. Vicki Donlin, when I met with her, just for your understanding, really wanted to emphasize that, Rosamond, this is a little bit like the transition from another name to the Hingham Maritime Center, that this should be described as the harbor play area, because it won't to suggest playground, which brings visions of Cronin Field with its 120 feet by 40 feet, 4-foot fence, that's not what's being contemplated here. It's something much lower key, much more aware of the site that it's in. So last item, but we're down to only 4, but we'll do our best. Next meeting. I was looking in September, and 3 dates that seemed to make some sense were a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, the 20th, 21st, or 22nd. Obviously, I'll have to poll the other members, but I wanted to get those who are here, just let me know whether those work for you or don't.
Only Tuesday or Wednesday works for me, 20th or 21st.
So Eric is Tuesday or Wednesday? Okay.
I'm only Thursday.
All right, we're doing great here. Ed?
Check my other calendar here.
This might be a joint meeting again, because if we do another round for the bathhouse.
Yeah. I think I'm here. Yeah, I'm free all those.
If it turns out to be Thursday, I could possibly make it, but I'll be late.
Okay. And Chris, I'm recalling that your committee did not choose a date for your next meeting.
We certainly
Didn't do that.
but that week works for me.
Okay, could you reach out to Chairman Peralt and see if, it sounds as if, so far, we could stretch to any of those days, and in order to try to get everybody here, Eric, if you'd be willing. And I'll have to reach out to other members if you just get back to me. So, in record time when we focused on the last half of the meeting, but that's frankly the way I expected this to go, that the discussion really was about the Bathhouse Snack Shack. We had some very good commentary from a lot of people, a lot of different perspectives. I think there was some neighborhood input. There was some, I'll call it advisory committee, fiscal conservatism input. We had lots of different input, and that's what this session was intended to do. So thanking all those who were here earlier, those who have stayed, and particular thanks to HCAM and their operator for recording all of this, so that we can, if people ask you, well, how did that meeting go, you can say to them, go to the town website and look for Harbor Developments and look for the meeting on August 18th, and it will all be here. And we certainly covered a lot of ground. So thank you very much. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
All right, motion that we adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Thank you. Ken, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you again to the public.